Parents gone wild.
She's 16! You sick.
You had a guy in the closet at 2:30 in the morning.
And viral.
You're never gonna be able to work in elementary ever again when I'm done with you.
Those are my children!
What got you so upset that you started live streaming?
I was really mad.
The school, when they saw this, went on lockdown.
Oh.
And guess what?
It gets worse.
How could it possibly get any worse? Oh, that's right. Okay, so I'm not the first person to expose Dr. Phil, and I definitely won't be the last. But unlike many who debunk this show, I am one of the select few who actually took the time to look into the show and break it down through qualitative data to create a research analysis on the issues surrounding this program. That issue, of course, being, and the central focus of my research, does Dr. Phil exploit people for his own personal gain through the use of sensationalistic shock value? Now, I know what you might be thinking, and the obvious answer is... But it isn't enough to just inherently know something, especially without explaining how you got there, and that's what this I-Search is about, exploring how I came to this conclusion and the process it took to get there. I want to begin talking on the clip I opened up with in this video, because yes, it has a purpose for being there. When we look at this ad, we see a great deal of emotions displayed with labels to quickly describe the emotions felt. Already, just at the surface level, we are seeing clips being taken out of context to entice the viewer. And that's how I found her. Yes, her. Cassie Maxwell, a 37-year-old woman from Roseau, Minnesota, who live-streamed on Facebook April 26, 2019, after being served a no trespassing order from her school. I first discovered Cassie back in 2019 during this exact commercial segment for the Parenting Gone Wild that Dr. Phil had previewed on the OWN network. Of course, since I was young and I wasn't really aware about the rigid structure that television programming had, I missed the episode, but many months later my mind still pondered on who this woman was. And why was she so mad? Spoilers ahead, everyone. Dr. Phil is one of the many generic daytime television talk shows on the We Couldn't Successfully Imitate the Discovery Health Channel network. It was created by Oprah Winfrey. A fraud! And executively produced by many other money-hungry capitalists. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how I came across this information, and you would be right to assume that I did indeed just open up my handy-dandy iPhone and search up some basic information into my Google bar to get a historical synopsis of the show. Yes, obvious words and phrases like Dr. Phil Wiki or Dr. Phil Show Information and Phony Phil. Okay, so maybe not that one, but you get the idea. Nothing too intensive to understand the background on the show and how it came to surface. So if you're still not familiar on what the Dr. Phil Show is and all of its allegedly self-proclaimed values, which will be important throughout the video, let me give you a little abstract on what this hullabaloo of a show is. So this show is about this guy who's a doctor, and his name is Philip Kelvin McGraw, aka Dr. Phil, aka the guy made by Oprah, aka what? This guy doesn't even have a medical license to administer any of the psychological or psychiatric help he gives, which we'll cover in a bit. The show started back in 2002, and according to Dr. Phil, had the goal of bringing psychology into the nation's living rooms. In a selective interview with Lori Myers, one of Dr. Phil's staff members, he implies that he sees himself on his platform not as his guest therapist, despite giving medical and therapeutic advice, but as a moderator who hopefully gives people who are suffering in silence some steps they can take toward finding help. Now, as inspiring and properly intended as that may seem, the show has very strict guidelines for guests who can come onto the show and a notorious reputation for blatantly attacking people's characters that don't conform to the rules of the show. There is no true progression of the Dr. Phil Show being a teaching tool for those that struggle with mental health problems, despite the illusion of one. Now, if I were to point out every mistake made in every episode, we'd be here for about 72 hours, and ain't nobody got time for that. Luckily, I don't have to, as the Dr. Phil Show follows a pretty basic and conspicuous formula with the once-in-a-blue-moon clever script, making almost every episode of the show the same episode. Here's how that formula goes. So the show always starts off with Dr. Phil addressing himself like the egomaniac he is, and then goes into previewing his client's issues before feeding into a whole host of condescending, overly critical advice given by Dr. Phil himself, before connecting the client to actually qualified professionals. Yeah, the show hasn't been too clear on why, if Dr. Phil has the resources to connect people with qualified professionals in the first place, why not just skip the middleman and do this to begin with? And if you were wondering the same thing, well, great job. You're already seeing the problem with this show. And in fact, the overarching ploy for gaining viewers has become so significantly obvious over the years that there's a whole episode dedicated to it. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen, because the I-Search is about to begin.